Today, I want to read our scripture from Matthew, the 11th chapter, verses 28 through 30. Matthew, the 11th chapter, verses 28 through 30. And this is what it says. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your. Ever since I came to know myself as a lesbian, and as that fact became more known in the church community, there have been those who assumed that sexuality and sexual orientation would be central to my ministry, that all of my sermons would focus on that aspect of our identity. But that's only one aspect of who I am. I am African American. I am a woman. I am, as they say, of a certain age. I'm one who lives with a disability. And yes, I am a woman who loves women. Well, these days, I'm a woman who loves one woman in a romantic sense. I've preached Black history sermons. I've preached women's history focused sermons. I've preached sermons that have touched on ability. I've preached sermons that support many of the communities of which I have no existential awareness. I'm not a man, but I've preached sermons that speak to men. So why, with this being Pride Month in the United States, why would I not preach a sermon that embraces the LGBTQ plus community? All communities, especially marginalized communities, need to be occasionally reminded of where we stand in relation to God. And for the LGBTQ plus community, this is particularly poignant in this season when there are those who are working hard to roll back some of the hard-won freedom and equality that has been gained, particularly what's been gained over the past 20 to 30 years. Those years since when in 1999, Bill Clinton declared the anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising in June as Gay and Lesbian Pride Month, followed by Barack Obama, I think it was in 2011 or 2010 or 2012, somewhere around there. He expanded that to include all the LGBTQ plus community. And the fact that some of us use the guise of morality or Christian ideals to promote and to support attacks makes it all the more important that we're reminded of who really knows the will of God and who knows how to exploit God's name for personal gain because of uninformed or unnecessary need to protect society by implementing things like don't say gay laws or making attacks literally or legally on transgender people, or making a commitment to counteract what some would call woke gender identities. I love that term, woke gender identities. If protecting the rights and freedoms of people who are created in the image of God is a woke ideology, we should all be glad that we're not asleep. Because if we really look at the example and the teachings of Jesus, we'll come to understand what it means to support and to protect all people, especially people who are vulnerable. Our text for today comes out of the Gospel of Matthew in the 11th chapter. In this chapter, there are depictions of many people who should have understood Jesus, but they just didn't get it. There was John the Baptist, who even foretold of the coming of the Messiah. He even baptized Jesus. But when he heard how Jesus was living and not being the type of Messiah he expected, he started to doubt, and he sent his own disciples to check Jesus out, to ask him, are you the one or should we look for another? He didn't believe. He didn't understand. Or how Jesus compared the people of his day as children who could not decide what game they wanted to play. He said, But to what will I compare this generation? It's like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to one another. We played the flute for you and you did not dance. We wailed and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they said, he has a demon. And Jesus, the Son of Man, came eating and drinking, and they said, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and of sinners. And then the people who actually lived in the city and witnessed what Jesus did, how he healed and how he helped many, they didn't understand Jesus either. And then there were even the scholars, the scribes and the Pharisees who could explain much, but they missed the revelation of God that was in their midst, because to them, Jesus didn't act in a manner that fit their understanding of what a Messiah would look like. Or maybe they just didn't want to shift fully into an ethic of love and compassion, because that often leads to having to share power, share wealth, and having to share influence. Maybe they weren't ready to make that shift. That's why in many ways, people try to create God in their own image and say God wants them to do certain actions. We've heard that in the news, that these decisions, these laws, these moves that are being made are being done in the name of God, but these are being done in the name of God for many people because they want God to hate the same people they hate. We never fully know the motives of those who want to exert their power and their positions over others. Sometimes it's even an attempt to control in someone else something that can't be faced or accepted by oneself. Whatever the reason, many people in the writer of Matthew's community, as it is for our time, many people just don't get who Jesus was and is, and what he believed and what he stood for. But the text goes on to express Jesus's response to the rejection and to the unacceptance. Jesus thanks God for having revealed the truth to the infants, as he puts it. What he means by infants, he means the unprivileged. He talks about the tax collectors, those who are despised and those who are outcast, the sinners, as they put it, and the poor. In other words, others who have been judged as unworthy by the elite and the powerful. What the privileged and powerful did not recognize was that their IQ, their position, or their privileged education were not avenues for the knowledge of God. In order to know God requires much more than intellectual perception. It includes choice and it includes intimacy. I'm not trying to suggest that those of us on the margins are unintelligent. Rather, true communion with God is something beyond our ability to reason, because how could we ever claim to fully know something that is outside of our grasp or our control? Our efforts to know God or our efforts to know Jesus oftentimes end up in images fashioned after ourselves, and that's not God. God is only known as a gift of grace. That's why for Jesus, the infants assume a place of divine favor, because they make no pretense to knowledge. They know that whatever they have is given to them by God. They do not judge God by some preconceived criterion. Those who do not find the crucified Christ either a stumbling block or foolishness. The infants are those who let God be God on God's own terms. So it's these people who are open to God's grace. It's to these people that Jesus extends an invitation. Jesus's invitation says, "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." This was an invitation to all people. This was an invitation to all who came to know and love and accept this invitation of grace that God gave us through Jesus. It's an invitation regardless of race and class and education or sexual orientation or gender identity or age, ability, or anything else. These socially constructed ways that we divide ourselves from one another. You know, some people like to act like they are guards of the kingdom or the realm of God. But, you know, God does not need to employ security. As God's revelation to us, Jesus never engaged guards either. He knew that his followers were just as tired of being misunderstood as he was. This is especially a good point to remember for those of us who are LGBTQ+, because many, if not most of us, have experienced some level of church hurt, where if we were not outright condemned to hell because of who we love or have an affinity for, we were not welcomed unconditionally either. How many of us have had to pass through that experience of those who said, love the sinner and hate the sin, as if a natural way of being, as the way people are born, could be a sin? Who we are is not sinful. How we choose to be in life can be. I always say it's not about who you love, it's about how you love that matters. That's why I used to say that when people either really wanted to stay in churches that condemn, or in other cases, people wanted to recreate the same type of churches, but just wanted them to welcome LGBTQ folk, I would say to folk, you know, nobody needs to be in some of these churches that we're begging to be in. In many ways, we ought to be happy that we're not welcome there, because if Jesus were here in the flesh, he would not be welcome without ridicule either. I remember Troy Perry once said, "The Lord is my shepherd and he knows I'm gay." Jesus said, "Come to me and learn from me, not come to me and hear what they say about me, not come to church and follow their rules and regulations." But Jesus said, "Come to me, because my yoke is easy and my burdens are light." Yoke being a collar that's used to control. And the Greek word for easy means suitable and appropriate and easy to wear. So what Jesus is inviting us to is something that's not so heavy, with not so many rules and not so much tradition. Jesus is saying, "Come to me." This is an offer of divine rest, divine Sabbath. But it's not a call to passivity. It's a call to discipleship. It's not about obedience to a code of external rules, but it's a call to loyalty to a leader. That's why it says, "Learn from me." This is an invitation to love. This is a call to compassion. This is a call to justice, a call to inclusion. Everybody's not going to get it. They never have, not throughout history, and not now, not our families, not our churches. Everybody's not going to get it. In our text, they just didn't understand Jesus in his own time, and they didn't understand the community that followed the teachings of Jesus in the time of the writer of the Gospel of Matthew. And these people who exclude and who are trying to roll back rights and divide our communities and our world in 2023, they just don't get it. They don't really understand Jesus. I'm glad today to know that Jesus's way, the way of love and justice, is still the way. It's the way we're invited to. And followers invited by Jesus, we don't need anybody else's approval. We just have to make a choice. And then we have work to do. Because even in our difficult times, I'm reminded of those words penned by Walter Hawkins a long time ago. he wrote a song called Jesus Christ is the Way. And the song says, when I think about the hour, I know what I must do. When I think about what God has done for me, then I'll open my heart to everyone I see. And I'll say, Jesus Christ is the way. My friends, Jesus doesn't invite us to church. Never has, never will. Jesus invites us to life. Thank you for listening.